Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Whitehouse, Ranking Member Durbin, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Right now, there's a brutal heat wave afflicting half the United States. Energy costs and insurance premiums are skyrocketing, and we're sitting here in the U.S. Senate talking about Chinese communist conspiracy theories straight out of the 1950s. I don't think this is the right priority. That said, there is a conspiracy here, and it's the obvious one, in plain sight. Big oil has made trillions of dollars in profits over the past several decades, and the industry is extremely harmful. It kills millions of people every year and has cost us trillions of dollars. The industry knew decades ago that burning fossil fuels would cause, in its own words, globally catastrophic harm. What it chose to do with that knowledge is remarkable. Imagine you've learned that something you are doing will cause globally catastrophic harm, will have, quote, serious consequences for humanity's survival. Those are the industry's words. I hope you would stop doing it. If for some reason you can't stop immediately because of the economic importance of your industry, then you could still alert the public and help work towards solutions, including selling safer, better forms of energy yourself. Worst case, you could at least keep quiet while other people go about learning about the problem and figuring out how to fix it. But the oil industry did none of these things. Instead, it actively lied and deceived people, spending millions of dollars on a deception campaign to cast doubt on science that the industry itself knew was correct. They had polling in the 1990s that showed strong public support and public concern for climate change, and that showed that public support for climate change turned to opposition when people were told that there was scientific disagreement about climate science. So that's what they did, manufacture doubt about climate science and fraudulently claim that scientists disagree about it. Even more remarkable, it's clear they believed the science themselves because they used it. For example, in the 1990s, they raised the height of offshore oil platforms to account for the sea level rise that they predicted. They did this while arguing to the public and Congress that climate science was too uncertain to make any costly economic decisions about it. But they weren't uncertain. They moved to protect their own investments and interests while lying to everyone else. This was all so they could keep profiting enormously. But the rest of us have not profited. Far from it. On the contrary, we're paying dearly. Last year alone, climate-related harms cost Americans nearly $1 trillion, more than 3% of GDP. This is like a stealth tax on all of us. Insurance premiums are skyrocketing due to climate-driven extreme weather. Insurance companies are pulling out of more and more places, even whole states. The chair of the Federal Reserve, as Senator Whitehouse noted, recently testified to a Senate committee that there are whole regions of the country where in 10 or 15 years, you won't be able to get a mortgage and there won't be bank branches or ATMs. This will have devastating economic consequences for our country. A large proportion of climate-related costs are already uninsured, and the burden is increasingly falling on American families and state and local governments. Some of those governments are trying to hold big oil accountable for a fraction of those costs so that the polluters responsible for the damage pay the costs instead of taxpayers getting stuck with the bill. This is a basic principle of fairness, something we teach to our toddlers. You make a mess, you clean it up. Also, the notion that a person who causes damage should pay for it is as old as law itself. You can see it in the Code of Hammurabi, written nearly 4,000 years ago. But oil companies don't like this principle because they're causing more harm than perhaps anyone else in human history. And they don't want to pay what they owe. They don't want the normal rules to apply. They want you to shield them from accountability. And they're pushing for it in part by funding people to spin cockamamie theories about China, like the ones we're hearing today. Speaking of China, if anyone is helping China right now in our political system, it's the party pushing what I think of as a serious energy retreat in the big ugly bill in Congress. Some people call it the big beautiful bill. That bill would put China way, way ahead of the U.S. by strangling our renewable energy, stifling innovation, and locking us into forking over hundreds of billions of dollars every year to the dirty, dangerous, expensive energy of 200 years ago, fossil fuels. The bill could shutter 331 factories and kill 330,000 jobs in the U.S. solar industry alone, mostly in red states, including ones represented by members of this committee. But that's what big oil wants, and that's the industry that happens to fund the elections of politicians supporting the bill and funds a vast network of groups that are still lying on its behalf. That's the conspiracy here, the obvious one in plain sight. Thank you.
Once climate change makes weather and weather conditions too unpredictable, there become areas of the country that can't insure themselves any longer. And once they can't insure themselves any longer in that area, you can't get mortgages any longer, which means that property values crash in that area and that local bankers suffer because their loan-to-value ratios crash and their mortgage revenue crashes. And that the combination of that local economic effect with the property value loss to those homeowners cascades into a full-on 2008-style recession. Could you walk us through that and where we're seeing some current examples of that already beginning to appear?
Sure. That's exactly right. Again, no less than the Republican chair of the Federal Reserve has said that there are whole regions of the country that soon you won't be able to get a mortgage, or and there may not be bank branches or ATMs, and that is because of insurers withdrawing from those areas. And the way this works is that climate harms raise insurance rates or cause insurers to withdraw entirely. They're withdrawing from entire states. There are headlines about this, every other month. When insurance becomes too expensive to afford or is just unavailable, that dramatically drops home values because you can't get a mortgage without insurance. And if you can't get a mortgage on a property, that dramatically shrinks the buying pool. And also, if the insurance is just really expensive, the expenses of paying for any asset, or any kind of ownership, reduce the value of the asset, right?
If the average homeowner's insurance price in Florida is now $14,000 a year,
yes,
and if that's predicted to double or triple, let's say it doubles. Now you go to $28,000 a year.
yes.
If when you buy a home, you know you're signing up for $28,000 a year in expense out of your pocket,
just for insurance.
Just for
not
insurance?
for maintenance
What does that
of the
do to the
home, not
value
for
of the home?
taxes, not for anything else. That's right. Then it gets a lot harder to sell your home. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And the value of your
Price goes
property
down.
falls a lot. Yes, that's absolutely right.
happening.
And that's what we're seeing in Florida. People are losing their insurance. It has some of the highest premiums in the country. Has some of the fastest premium increases in the country. There's been, according to data from the Federal Insurance Office, there was a 168% increase from 2018 to 2022 in Floridians who have to go to the state last resort insurer, Florida citizens, because they can't get insurance from anyone else. 10% of Florida homeowners already don't have insurance. And more people are unable to afford these premiums. It could easily cause a real estate crash that has nationwide effects, as you said, just like the financial crisis of 2008, which had its roots in a sharp decrease in home values.
If an industry is lying to the public about the dangers of the product that it sells, is that established to be a legally actionable situation? And is the tobacco lawsuit an example of that?
That's exactly right. These are not novel legal theories. In fact, they're some of the oldest in our country. Some of them go way back, way before our country in English common law. If you're responsible for harms, you pay for them. If you can't commit fraud to consumers, you can't engage in a fraud racket. And a fraud racket is exactly what Big Tobacco engaged in and was successfully sued by the U.S. Department of Justice for.
Thank you very much. And State Attorneys General points out our State Attorney
And State
General
Attorneys
was
General,
involved
that's
in that.
absolutely right.
All the Attorneys General of the United States of America, including Kansas, joined our lawsuit because of the legal action based on the Unfair Trade Practices Act. The core states that brought that lawsuit relied on deceptive and unfair practice allegations, saying that the tobacco companies were lying when they said our product doesn't cause cancer, it doesn't cause death, it doesn't cause disease. It was a good old-fashioned garden variety consumer protection case. Every state in the country gets money to combat tobacco because it relied on the good old-fashioned consumer protection statutes that say when you make a promise to consumers, it has to be truthful and accurate. The state of Connecticut is suing ExxonMobil right now under the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act, saying basically it's lying about its product. You are suing Pfizer. same kinds of allegations, correct?
The similarity
But
is...
no one is accusing you of trying to destroy the American drug industry.
No, I don't think so, but I think they're not the same. They're the same. They both try to use a consumer protection box to put the case in. In the case of the Pfizer, they made certain representations about their product and that turned out to be contrary to the information they had, and the individual took it to direct harm to himself. In the case of fossil fuels, you have a broad public debate about the harms and how big they are, who's causing the harms. You also have third parties because it's not just the oil company.
In court, Connecticut has to prove its allegation, the facts behind the allegation, that in fact the company is misrepresenting its product. Just as you have to prove,
Right.
by the way,
Absolutely.
as you well know,
Yes.
Your case has been remanded to state court, so you'll have your day in court there, but no less than if you were in federal court, you're going to have to offer evidence that proves your allegation. Same is true of Connecticut in suing ExxonMobil. I don't see how, as a lawyer, you can say, well, the claims under the statute are wrongly brought just because it's a different industry and because there is a public debate. Because
I'm not saying you
also
can't.
about the American drug industry.
I'm not saying the claims are wrongly brought. I'm saying they have a much harder time proving the claims because of there's less deception. There's also third parties, and also it's not just the fossil fuel extraction company. You have the factory that then burns the fuels. You have the individuals themselves who drive to work in a car. Probably most of us flew here from some point on a plane.
My time has expired, but I could take the words exactly that you've just uttered and substitute tobacco, and they would be identical to what the tobacco industry was saying about our lawsuit at the time.
How do you distinguish between a person whose motivation is to be left-wing Chinese sympathizer and people who just disagree with the fossil fuel industry that climate change, in fact, is real and we have to do something about it? Can you explain to me?
Well, at the beginning of my oral testimony there, I made the distinction between whatever the intentions of various folks may be, they are objectively assisting China in its desire to compete with the United States.
The Hewlett Foundation?
Yes.
Seriously. Walter Hewlett, his foundation, you think is in bed with the Communist Party? So the fact that Senator Durbin here has solar panels, does that make him a communist sympathizer?
No, I don't think so, any more than my driving to this hearing today makes me a mass murderer or an accessory to mass murder.
We've got a planet that's melting, all right? That's my view. The oil industry doesn't agree with that. They think everything's fine. What I'm seeing in the arguments that you were making is you're trying to demean and disparage and discredit arguments by people who believe that we need a radically different policy. It does allow for the development of clean energy to reduce carbon emissions. And then one of the tools is to vilify folks who have that point of view, that they are dupes of the Communist Party that's trying to take us down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Is it appropriate for sitting judges to receive climate science, quote-unquote, education from advocacy groups like the Environmental Law Institute, groups that are directly tied to the plaintiffs in active litigation?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not believe it is. The judges are there to be neutral. I don't think it's appropriate for litigants to be training the judges in essentially what their experts are going to say in the trial.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to this as well?
No, because we've got limited time if someone else wants to get into it. General Kobach, isn't it true that... Actually, go ahead, Mr. Arkush.
Environmental Law Institute has multiple oil companies on its board, executives of oil companies, BP and Shell, and it has counsel representing them in court in important leadership positions.
So we may be breaking news here. Are you, on behalf of Public Citizen, calling for the Environmental Law Institute to stop training training judges and indoctrinating judges?
What I'm saying is it doesn't make any sense to say that they're indoctrinating judges as some sort of leftist plot.
Okay, let's be clear.
Against the oil companies.
It's interesting you said that,
think
but you
people-
weren't willing to go to the natural next step of, therefore it should stop.
I don't know that much about it, but I do know that BP and Shell are on the board.
Because you want the judges to be biased and rule in favor of these crackpot theories. Now,
I disagree
General
that BP
Kobach,
and Shell are on the board of an organization.
isn't
that
it true?
judges against them.
Mr. Arkush, your time is done.
Thank you.
Define for this committee what homicide means.
It's essentially a blanket term for any form of unlawful killing. And an unlawful killing is causing death with a culpable mental state. Causing a death means substantially contributing to it or accelerating it. And a culpable mental state could be negligence, knowledge, recklessness.
So you wrote an article in 2023 entitled, quote, Climate Homicide, Prosecuting Big Oil for Climate Deaths. In that article, you argue that oil and gas executives could be prosecuted, not just sued, but criminally prosecuted for homicide, for murder, based on climate change. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, I would be careful with the wording because murder, again, is a technical term. And definitely we're not arguing that they could be prosecuted for first-degree murder. That's killing with, intent.
But you want to put them in prison for homicide, lock them up, treat them as criminals, put them in. Murderers people who commit homicide get put in jails with violent criminals. And your position is this is a reasonable and rational thing that we should put the people leading the energy companies in America, producing 8.5 million jobs, we should arrest them and throw them in jail. Is that correct?
It could be the case that some executives should be prosecuted in that way. Of course, you can't put a corporation in jail, so there are other remedies in that situation.
But you can put human beings in jail, and presumably you'd put the corporate officers in jail.
Yes, you can.
I'm going to go on the record as saying that is a moonbeam wacky theory. How did you get to the Capitol today?
So here's what I want to tell you.
How did you get to the Capitol today?
I took an Uber.
You took an Uber.
Yep.
Now, was that in an automobile?
Yes.
Did that automobile have gasoline in it?
Yes. This is very, very cute. I see where this is going.
So I'm glad you think it's cute. Under your theory, you emitted carbon emissions.
Yep.
Should you be arrested in this room right now and prosecuted for murder?
No.
Why?
That's not what the law holds.
Tell me why, because you're willing to say the guy who sold you the gasoline should be prosecuted for murder. You're the one that benefited from it. Couldn't you have ridden a bicycle or maybe some fairy dust to get here?
The guy who sold the gas and 50 years ago knew that it was going to cause globally catastrophic damage that would cause problems for humanity.
But you have exquisite knowledge of this. You are saying you are an expert. So on mens rea,
I'm not done.
You have a level of culpability because you claim that the act of getting in that car was violence, it was murder, that you should be locked up. Why do you get to violate these principles in a way that you just want to lock up the person who sold you the gas but not the beneficiary of it?
That's your claim, not mine, because to be liable, there are a bunch of reasons, but one of them is you have to substantially contribute to the harm, to the death.
Okay,
and
so
I am
how many car rides is substantially? Is it one? Is it two? Is it 10? How many?
A single individual couldn't possibly contribute enough. The point is...
Well, what about if, say, you're a Democrat politician who
do you
flies...
do you want me to answer
What
this
about if you're a
question?
Democrat politician who flies private jets?
It would be helpful if you're asking the questions. Doesn't he get to answer them?
Yeah.
He gets to answer them in my time, just like he gets to answer them in your time when you are asking them.
Seems like I don't.
My question was, would you prosecute John Kerry for murder?
Obviously not. No.
Okay, so Democrat politicians are exempted.
There is no individual...
Democrat activists are exempted.
I'm not going after people for carbon footprints. The whole thing is actually...
Well, why not, though? Under your principle, carbon is killing us. You claim it is homicide. By the way, this is a whack job theory.
You can't put the blame either in a homicide case or in a public nuisance case just on the company that extracted the oil from the ground, because everybody's using it and we're all involved in it, and that's why it doesn't fit homicide easily and it doesn't fit public nuisance easily either.
A defendant in a homicide case can't defend by saying somebody used my products exactly as I intended them to while I was lying to them about it.
So you're saying we should prosecute you for murder?
No.
Because you drove an automobile here?
No. I'm saying...
Well, you said you couldn't use a defense. The fact that someone else does it,
you
you contributed. You're a murderer. Under your wacky theory, you're a murderer too.
I'm not sure I should be trying to speak. Can I finish a sentence or
For
two?
once, we agree. Senator Whitehouse.
Will you allow the witness to answer without interruption during my time?
It's your time. You're welcome.
Just interrupted him during my time.
You are
so I'm
welcome
asking
to
if you will
sing.
now-
No, he was actually, it was the end of my time. You're welcome to sing, or
You'd already
you can
recognized me.
conduct
All I want
poetry
is
in
for you to-
iambic pentameter. You can blow a kazoo. You can do whatever you wish.
Go ahead and answer the question that you were.
Thank
Prevented
you.
from
I'm
answering.
a little lost now as to where we were, but my point was that a fossil fuel producer in a criminal trial would not be able to say, I mean, there's legal doctrine on this, right? You can say there's an intervening third party, intervening circumstances that disrupt the chain of causation. You cannot say that when the third party, their actions were completely foreseeable. Like, for example, a consumer using your product exactly as you intended. You also can't use it when you defrauded them into using your product exactly as you intended.
The company can't use that
That's
defense
right.
when it is on the delivery end of the fraud.
It's meritless in a criminal context anyway.
The tobacco case focused on key organizations, not everybody who smoked and gave secondhand smoke. Lawyers know how to sort through this stuff. You can make as much fun as you like of an article that Mr. Arkush wrote, but that doesn't take away from the fundamental fact that the Earth's natural systems are being badly degraded by fossil fuel, and that the fossil fuel industry knew that this would happen, and that for years, knowing that it would happen, they lied about it. They set up whole organizations to lie about it even more. They fund an entire armada of front groups whose job is to lie about it. And I do believe that it's proper to hold a corporation accountable for that kind of misconduct. Mr. Arkush.
Hey, there are two things I'd like to say. One, it does seem like we can all agree on one thing, which is that groups spending money to influence other people's behavior can be problematic. And sometimes people don't do things for the right reasons. They do things because they're getting paid, right? And there is almost nobody in the world with more resources than the fossil fuel industry to be paying people to do their bidding. And I think it's just important to note that. As Senator Whitehouse noted, one of them alone, ExxonMobil last year, almost $1 billion in profits a day. Every day, that's more than twice the amount that was on that chart that you held up, Mr. Chairman, for all the environmental groups. So, right, ExxonMobil, twice that amount every single day. That's just one of the oil companies. Second, I just want to say, my understanding of this theory about China is that, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that China is ahead of the US right now in manufacturing some aspects of renewable energy, right? Solar panels, batteries, ahead on critical minerals, right? And I guess the theory is, therefore they want to stifle our fossil fuels so that we're dependent on them for their renewable energy. If we are losing a competition with China on the technologies of tomorrow, we should be investing in those technologies and funding them, right? Imagine in the late 50s and early 60s when we were worried we were losing the space race with the Soviet Union. Imagine if instead of saying, in 1962, Kennedy saying, we're going to go to the moon by the end of this decade, he said, you know what? We're going to defund all of aeronautics and stay on the ground. Is that the way to make America strong and great? I don't think so. And I wish that you would all join the people who are trying to make America strong and great today and tomorrow by funding the industries and the energy sources of tomorrow that are cleaner, safer, and cheaper, like renewables.